It was a cold evening in late November when Daniel first noticed something strange about his house. The sky was gray, and the wind outside whistled through the trees, brushing against the old windows of their two-story home. He lived there with his wife, Clara, and their two children, Emily and Noah. Life in the small town had always been peaceful. Their home stood on a quiet street, surrounded by tall oaks and friendly neighbors. Nothing unusual ever happened there. But that night was different. Daniel sat in the living room, sipping his tea, when he heard a faint sound coming from the basement, a dull, metallic thud, followed by a low hum. It was so soft at first that he thought it was just the pipes. He got up, frowning, and glanced toward the basement door. The sound came again. This time, it was clearer, like something being dragged slowly across the floor. Clara was busy in the kitchen, and the kids were upstairs, laughing over some online video. Daniel decided to check it out himself. He opened the basement door, and a cool, musty smell hit his nose. The air was damp and heavy. He reached for the light switch, but when he flicked it on, the bulb just flickered weakly before dying completely. The stairs disappeared into darkness. For a second, Daniel hesitated. He thought about going back for a flashlight, but then he heard the sound again, a scraping noise, deeper now, followed by what sounded like a whisper. It made his heart skip. He called out softly, "Hello? Is someone down there?" There was no reply. Daniel took a step down, then another, his hand brushing against the wall as he moved. The smell grew stronger, a mix of dust, metal, and something else he couldn't identify. When he reached the bottom, he stood still, letting his eyes adjust to the faint light seeping in through the small window near the ceiling. Everything seemed normal, old boxes, old furniture, and some unused tools. He sighed and was about to turn back when his foot hit something hard. He crouched down, ran his hand across the floor, and felt the cold edge of a metal pipe that wasn't there before. Confused, he bent closer and noticed something odd. The floor near the old boiler looked uneven, as if part of it had been moved or lifted recently. He stood up again, uneasy. He decided not to think too much about it and went back upstairs. When Clara asked what happened, he smiled and said it was probably just the pipes or a raccoon under the house. But deep down, he knew that sound was different. That night, when he went to bed, he kept thinking about that uneven patch of floor. He couldn't sleep. Around midnight, he heard soft footsteps in the hallway. He opened his eyes and saw the shadow of someone small moving toward the stairs. It was Emily. She was 12, quiet, and thoughtful, always reading or drawing. Daniel watched as she tiptoed toward the basement door. She opened it slowly, trying not to make noise. Daniel sat up straight. "Emily," he whispered. She froze, then turned around quickly, looking startled. "Dad," she said in a shaky voice, "I was just getting water." But she wasn't holding a glass. She was holding a small flashlight. Daniel didn't question her right away. He told her to go back to bed and closed the door himself. But the moment she disappeared upstairs, he opened it again and peered down. The basement was silent again, yet something about Emily's nervous look kept his mind awake. The next morning, he tried to act normal, but during breakfast, he noticed that both Emily and Noah avoided eye contact. They spoke in hushed tones, whispering to each other when they thought he wasn't listening. It was strange. They were close siblings, but something about their secretive behavior felt off. Clara noticed too. "They're just growing up," she said with a soft smile, trying to calm him. But Daniel wasn't convinced. A few days passed, and the noise in the basement grew louder. At first, it was just scraping or thumping, but soon it started sounding like something moving, or someone. One night, when the family was asleep, Daniel decided to record it. He placed his phone near the basement door and left it there. The next morning, he listened to the recording. The first few minutes were silent. Then came the sound of faint whispers, like children talking softly. He could hear Emily's voice. But there was another sound too, deeper, slower, not like any voice he recognized. His blood ran cold. What was going on down there? Daniel didn't want to jump to conclusions, but he knew he had to check again. When he went down later that day, he noticed something new. Near the back wall of the basement, behind an old wooden shelf, there was a square outline on the wall, as if someone had tried to patch it recently. The cement looked fresher, the color lighter than the rest. He ran his hand over it. It felt hollow. He tapped it lightly, and the sound was different, not solid, but empty behind. Someone had sealed something inside. He called Clara to take a look, but she was busy preparing dinner, so he decided to wait. He didn't want to scare her without proof. That evening, he mentioned it casually, but Clara laughed it off. Maybe it's just the old foundation, she said. But Daniel couldn't let it go. That weekend, the plumbing started acting strange. The taps made weird noises, and the water pressure dropped suddenly. Clara called a plumber, a middle-aged man named Harris who lived a few streets away. He arrived on Sunday morning with his tools. Probably just a blockage, he said with a grin. Daniel showed him the basement. As Harris walked down the stairs, he paused. "You got some damp smell here," he said. "Might be a leak somewhere." Daniel nodded. He stood nearby, watching as the plumber began checking the pipes. Harris moved slowly, testing joints and tapping on the walls. When he reached the back corner, the one Daniel had been worried about, he frowned. He muttered. "This wall doesn't sound right." Daniel's stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" he asked. Harris tapped it again. "It's hollow." "That's not normal." "Did someone do any work here recently?" Daniel shook his head. "Not that I know of." Harris scratched his beard. "Mind if I open it a little? Just to see what's behind?" Daniel hesitated, then nodded. Harris took out a hammer and carefully began chipping away at the patch. The cement was soft, as if it had been placed only a short time ago. Piece by piece, he removed it until a small hole opened up. Dust fell to the ground, and a faint smell came through, something old and metallic. Daniel covered his nose. "What is that?" he whispered. Harris shone his flashlight through the hole and froze. His expression changed. He pulled back slowly. "Sir," he said quietly, "you might want to take a look at this." Daniel took the flashlight from his hand and bent down. Inside the small hole, he saw a glimpse of something wrapped in black plastic. His heart pounded. He felt sweat on his forehead. "What is it?" he asked, his voice trembling. Harris looked uncomfortable. "It looks like... I don't know. Maybe some tools? Or something buried." Daniel didn't wait. He widened the hole with his hands, pulling the edges until the opening was big enough to reach inside. He touched the plastic and felt something firm underneath. He pulled gently, and a corner came loose, revealing a faded piece of fabric, pink, with small drawings on it. It looked like a child's blanket. For a moment, time stopped. Daniel's hand froze. His breath quickened. He turned toward the plumber, whose eyes were wide. "Sir," Harris said carefully, "I think you should call someone." But Daniel shook his head. He wanted to understand first. He pulled a bit more of the wrapping, but before he could open it fully, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned around sharply. Emily and Noah were standing at the bottom of the stairs, their faces pale. Emily's eyes were filled with fear. "Dad," she said softly, "please, don't open it." The words cut through the silence like a blade. Daniel stared at her, confused, angry, scared all at once. "Emily," he said, his voice shaking, "what is this? What are you hiding?" She didn't answer. Noah grabbed her hand and whispered something Daniel couldn't hear. Then they both ran upstairs. Daniel stood there, frozen, the blanket still half hidden in the wall. Harris looked at him, speechless. Do you want me to stop? The plumber asked. Daniel nodded slowly. Yes, he said in a low voice. Just stop for now. After Harris left, Daniel sat alone in the basement for a long time. The small hole in the wall seemed to breathe, whispering secrets into the cold air. He stared at the black plastic, his mind racing with questions. What could his children be hiding? Why did Emily beg him not to open it? That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept hearing her voice in his head, "Please, don't open it." The words haunted him. The house felt different now. Quiet, yet heavy. Every sound, every shadow made his heart race. He knew one thing for sure, whatever was behind that wall, it was something his children didn't want him to see. And deep down, Daniel was terrified to find out why. Daniel barely slept that night. He tossed and turned, his mind full of questions that refused to go away. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the image of the black plastic inside the basement wall, and Emily's frightened face. The words echoed again and again, "Please, don't open it." What could make his children so scared? What were they hiding that they'd rather keep buried than explain? When morning came, the sky was still gray, and the air outside felt heavy, like a storm was coming. Clara noticed his pale face as he poured his coffee. "You didn't sleep well," she said softly. Daniel didn't reply. He just nodded and stared at his cup. Emily and Noah came down later, their eyes downcast. They didn't greet him. Clara looked from one to another, confused. "What's going on?" she asked. No one answered. The silence at the table was so thick it felt almost painful. After breakfast, Daniel told Clara that the plumber had found something odd in the basement wall. She frowned. "Like what?" she asked. He hesitated. "I'm not sure." It was wrapped in plastic. Looked like something old. Clara looked uneasy. "Did you open it?" she asked. "No," he said quickly. "Emily stopped me." Clara turned to their daughter. "Emily, why would you stop your father?" Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Please, Mom," she whispered, "just leave it alone." That was all she said before running upstairs again. Clara turned to Daniel, worried now. "What's going on with her? And Noah too? They've been acting strange." Daniel stood up. "I'll find out," he said quietly. He went down to the basement once more. The air was colder today, and the smell stronger. He crouched near the hole and stared at the black plastic. The little pink blanket corner peeked through like a wound in the wall. He didn't touch it. Instead, he sat on the floor and looked around carefully. Something felt off. The boxes had been moved slightly, the dust disturbed. Someone had been here recently. He picked up one of the boxes and opened it, just old books, some toys, and broken Christmas lights. But beneath them, he found something unexpected, a small brown notebook, the kind kids use for school. He opened it and froze when he saw Emily's handwriting inside. The first page had her name written neatly at the top, Emily Carter, age 12. Beneath it were short notes, little thoughts, and doodles. But as he flipped through, the words grew darker. There were entries like, "He said he won't go away. Noah told me to keep quiet. We have to hide it before Dad finds out." Daniel's hands began to shake. He read faster, his breath quickening. The last page was smudged, as if it had been written in a hurry. It said, "We didn't mean to hurt anyone. We just wanted to help." He closed the notebook and stared into space. Hurt anyone? Help who? His mind spun with confusion. He needed to know more. But he also knew if he confronted the kids now, they might shut down completely. So he decided to wait until they got home from school and try to talk calmly. When he went upstairs, Clara was folding laundry. "I think Emily knows something," he said. And Noah too. She sighed. They're kids, Daniel. Maybe they're just scared of something small. But he shook his head. No, this is not small. That afternoon, after school, Daniel called them both to the living room. He sat quietly, holding Emily's notebook in his hand. I found this in the basement, he said softly. Emily's face turned white. Noah looked down, his fists clenched. I'm not angry, Daniel continued. I just want to understand what's going on. What did you hide in the wall? Emily's eyes filled with tears. Dad, please, she said, you don't understand. Daniel leaned forward. Then help me understand. Tell me the truth. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Noah suddenly stood up. We can't tell you, he said sharply. It's not ours to tell. Daniel frowned. Not yours? Then whose is it? Noah bit his lip and said nothing. Emily reached for her brother's hand, trembling. If we tell, she whispered, they'll come back. Daniel's blood ran cold. Who will come back? He asked. But Emily didn't answer. She looked at him with wide, fearful eyes, then burst into tears. Clara ran over to comfort her, but Daniel sat frozen, trying to process her words. They'll come back. Who were they? That night, after everyone went to bed, Daniel went down to the basement again. He couldn't stop himself. The darkness felt heavier now. The bulb above flickered weakly. He stared at the wall and took a deep breath. Then, slowly, he began removing the rest of the cement around the hole. The sound of his chisel echoed softly in the still air. When the hole was large enough, he pulled the black plastic out carefully. It was lighter than he expected. He placed it on the ground, unwrapped it slowly, and gasped. Inside was not a body, not what he feared, but a small metal box. Old, rusted, locked with a tiny padlock. On top of it was a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it and found just one sentence written in shaky handwriting. Don't open unless you're ready to lose everything. Daniel's hands trembled. He sat back, breathing hard. Who wrote this? And what did it mean? He turned the box around. The lock was old but weak. He could break it easily. But something inside him said no. Maybe the note was a warning. Maybe his kids were right. He stood up, pacing back and forth. He thought about calling Clara, but she'd already gone to bed. He didn't want to wake her until he knew more. So he placed the box on a shelf and covered it with a cloth. But as he turned to leave, he noticed something new, small footprints in the dust near the corner. They were fresh. Someone had been here recently. And they were too small to be his. He climbed the stairs slowly, feeling a chill crawl up his spine. When he reached the top, he froze. Emily was standing at the doorway, her face pale, eyes wide open. Dad, she whispered, you opened it, didn't you? Daniel's heart pounded. No, he said quickly, I didn't open it. Emily shook her head, tears streaming down her face. You shouldn't have touched it, she said. Now they'll know. Who will know? Daniel demanded, stepping closer. But she turned and ran down the hall, slamming her bedroom door shut. Daniel stood there, speechless. He could hear her sobbing softly on the other side of the door. He wanted to comfort her, but something in her voice, that deep, terrified tone, stopped him. He went back to his room, his mind spinning. Clara stirred in her sleep as he sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. He thought about calling the police or maybe showing the box to someone, but what would he say? My kids hid a locked box in the wall and left a warning note? They'd think he was paranoid. The next morning, Daniel woke up early. He wanted to get to the basement before anyone else did. But when he got there, his stomach dropped, the box was gone. The cloth was still there, but the shelf was empty. He looked around in panic. He checked behind the shelves, under the stairs, even in the storage crates. Nothing. Someone had taken it. He ran upstairs, calling for Emily and Noah, but their rooms were empty. Their beds were unmade. The front door was slightly open. Clara came running down the hall. "What's going on?" she cried. Daniel looked at her, his voice trembling. "They're gone." Clara froze. "What do you mean gone?" Daniel pointed to the open door. "They took the box." She covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes filling with tears. "Oh my God, Daniel, what's happening to our children?" He had no answer. He grabbed his jacket and rushed outside, scanning the street. The wind was cold and sharp. There were no footprints on the road, no sign of where they had gone. He ran to the end of the street, calling their names again and again, but the only sound that came back was the echo of his own voice. When he returned home, Clara was on the phone, calling everyone they knew, friends, neighbors, the school, but no one had seen them. Daniel sat on the couch, running his hands through his hair. His mind raced through every possibility. Had someone taken them? Were they running from something? Or was this all somehow connected to that box in the wall? He looked toward the basement door again, that dark, silent doorway that had started everything. He could almost feel it watching him. That night, the police came. They searched the house, asked questions, took notes. Daniel told them about the basement, about the box, even about the note. The officers exchanged skeptical glances but promised to investigate. When they left, the house fell silent again. Clara sat in the living room, crying softly. Daniel went to the window and looked out at the empty street. Then he heard it, a soft creak, coming from below. The basement door was slightly open again. He swallowed hard and walked toward it slowly. Each step felt heavy. He reached for the doorknob, his heart pounding, and pulled it open. The air that rose from below was cold, almost freezing. And from the darkness, he heard a whisper. It was faint, but clear. A child's voice said, "We told you not to open it." Daniel froze, his breath catching in his throat. The sound faded, leaving only silence. He stood there for a long time, staring into the blackness below, feeling the weight of something he could no longer understand. The next morning came too slowly for Daniel. The night had been long, full of shadows and whispers that kept him from closing his eyes. The sound he'd heard from the basement, Emily's voice, or whatever it was, still echoed in his mind. He had spent hours staring at the dark doorway, afraid to go near it, yet unable to look away. By dawn, he felt like a man caught between dream and nightmare. Clara hadn't slept either. She sat on the couch, holding her phone, calling every relative, every friend, every possible place the children might have gone. But no one had seen Emily or Noah since yesterday morning. Their school confirmed they hadn't shown up. The police promised to send a search team, but Daniel could tell they didn't fully believe his story. To them, it was just two kids who ran away after a family argument. Daniel knew better. His children were hiding something big, something terrifying. And now, whatever it was, it had taken them too. The basement door stood slightly open, just as it had the night before. Daniel couldn't stop looking at it. The cold smell rising from below made his stomach twist. Clara refused to go near it anymore. "It's that place," she said in a trembling voice. "Something's wrong down there, Daniel. You should never have touched that wall." He wanted to argue, but part of him feared she was right. Ever since the plumber broke through that cement, nothing in their home felt normal. The air seemed colder, the shadows darker, and even the silence felt alive. That afternoon, the police returned to search the basement properly. 2 officers walked down with flashlights and masks. Daniel waited at the top of the stairs, heart pounding. He heard their footsteps echoing softly, their voices low. After a while, one of them called up, "Mr. Carter, there's no sign of the children down here. But we found something you should see." Daniel hurried down. One officer pointed his flashlight toward the back wall, the same place where the box had been hidden. The hole was now wider, the cement cracked around it. "Did you break more of this wall?" the officer asked. "No," Daniel said quickly. "I didn't touch it." The officer frowned. "Then someone else did." He shone the light inside the hollow space. There were faint marks, scratches, like fingernails, along the inner surface of the cement. And deep inside, barely visible, was a small drawing done in black ink. Daniel leaned closer. It was a child's drawing, two stick figures holding hands, standing beside what looked like a door. Above them, written in shaky letters, were the words, "They are waiting." The officer exchanged glances with his partner. "Probably just the kids fooling around," he said, but Daniel shook his head. "Emily wouldn't draw something like that." His voice cracked slightly. The officers searched the rest of the basement, but there was nothing else, no footprints, no sign of anyone leaving through the small window. It was as if Emily and Noah had simply vanished into thin air. After they left, Daniel sat on the basement floor, staring at that strange drawing. His heart felt heavy with fear and guilt. He wished he'd never let the plumber touch that wall. He wished he'd listened to Emily when she begged him to stop. He ran his fingers across the drawing. The ink felt dry, but the wall around it was damp and cold. He pressed harder, and the wall made a faint sound, like a hollow knock. He froze. The sound came again, this time from deeper inside. A soft, rhythmic thumping. He stepped back, his breathing quick. "Hello?" he called out, half expecting no reply. But then came a faint whisper, almost too soft to hear. "Dad." Daniel's body went cold. It was Emily's voice. He turned pale, staring at the wall. "Emily? Emily, where are you?" There was no answer, only another whisper, "Don't open," before fading completely. Daniel stumbled backward, his knees weak. For a moment, he thought he was losing his mind. Maybe the stress, the sleepless nights, everything was making him hear things. But deep down, he knew what he heard was real. He ran upstairs, calling Clara. "I heard her," he shouted. "I heard Emily." Clara looked frightened. "Where?" "In the basement wall," he said breathlessly. "She spoke to me." Clara stared at him in disbelief. "Daniel, please," she said, tears in her eyes. "You're scaring me." "The police said there's nothing there." But he couldn't stop. "I know what I heard," he insisted. "She's down there. Somehow, she's down there." Clara grabbed his arm. "Stop it. You're losing yourself." Her voice cracked with fear and exhaustion. Daniel stood still, chest heaving. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, quietly, Clara said, "Maybe we should stay somewhere else tonight. This house doesn't feel safe anymore." Daniel wanted to agree, but he couldn't leave. Not yet. Not while his children were missing, and not while that wall still held its secret. Later that evening, when Clara finally fell asleep, Daniel went down again. He took a hammer, a flashlight, and a deep breath. "If you're there, Emily," he whispered, "I'm coming." Then he began breaking the rest of the wall. Each swing of the hammer echoed like thunder through the basement. Dust filled the air, coating his skin, his mouth, his eyes. When he finally broke through completely, he found something he couldn't explain. Behind the wall was another space, a small hidden room. He stepped inside slowly. It was dark, silent, and freezing cold. The air smelled like wet soil and rust. The flashlight beam swept across the room, revealing broken wooden planks, old pipes, and strange carvings on the concrete. Symbols. Circles. Lines. Words he didn't understand. In the middle of the floor lay a small blanket, pink, with drawings on it. Emily's blanket. He knelt down, his throat tightening. "Emily," he whispered. The silence pressed around him like a weight. Then he noticed something else, tiny footprints in the dust. 2 sets. One smaller than the other. They led to the far corner of the hidden room and stopped in front of what looked like another wall. But this one was different. It wasn't made of cement. It looked like wood, old and dark, with a handle at the center. A door. Daniel's heart raced. He reached out and touched the handle. It was cold, colder than ice. He hesitated. Part of him screamed not to open it. But another part, the desperate father, needed to know what was behind it. He took a deep breath and pulled. The door didn't move. He tried again, harder this time. It creaked but didn't open fully. Just a small gap. A rush of air escaped, thick and musty, and with it came a faint sound, like distant breathing. He stepped back, his flashlight shaking in his hand. "Emily," he whispered again. Nothing. He was about to leave when something caught his eye, a shape behind the gap. Something standing just beyond the door. Small. Still. Watching. He froze. The shape didn't move, but Daniel could feel its presence. His instinct screamed to run. He stumbled backward, tripping over debris, and scrambled out of the hidden room. He slammed the hammer against the entrance until part of the wall caved in, sealing it again. Then he ran upstairs, gasping for air. When he reached the living room, Clara was standing there, pale as a ghost. "What happened?" she cried. Daniel couldn't speak at first. His throat was dry. Finally, he whispered, "There's another room, behind the wall." Clara shook her head. "No. That's impossible." "I saw it," he said. "And someone's in there." Clara's eyes widened in horror. "Someone?" He nodded slowly. A small figure, standing behind a door. Clara covered her mouth, trembling. "We need to leave, Daniel. Right now." But Daniel didn't move. His thoughts were tangled between fear and disbelief. "What if it's them?" he said. "What if Emily and Noah are trapped in there?" Clara looked at him, her face pale, tears streaming down. "And what if it's not them?" she whispered. The question hung in the air like smoke. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep again. He sat in the living room, staring at the basement door. Every hour or so, he thought he heard movement down there, a slow creak, a soft shuffle. Around midnight, he heard something else, a faint knock, 3 times, from below. Then silence. He waited, heart pounding. Another 3 knocks came, louder this time. Then a voice, soft, shaky, and familiar. "Dad, please, help us." Daniel jumped up, tears filling his eyes. "Emily!" "Noah!" he shouted, running toward the basement door. He threw it open, but what he saw stopped him cold. The basement light was flickering on and off, and at the bottom of the stairs stood 2 figures, small, pale, unmoving. Their faces were hidden in the shadows. "Emily," he whispered again, stepping down slowly. The figures didn't reply. The air grew colder with each step. When he reached halfway, the light above him flickered once more, and went out completely. The basement fell into total darkness. He froze, listening. Then came a whisper, right beside his ear, though no one was there. "You shouldn't have opened the wall." Daniel stumbled back, heart racing, his breath shallow. He turned and ran up the stairs, slamming the doors shut behind him. His whole body shook as he locked it. Clara came rushing from the bedroom, panicked. "Daniel, what happened?" He could barely speak. His lips trembled as he whispered, "They're down there." "Who?" she asked. He looked at her with wide, terrified eyes. "Emily and Noah," he said. "But they're not the same anymore." The next morning felt heavier than usual. The sunlight came through the kitchen window, but it couldn't warm the tension that hung inside the house. Lisa sat at the table, staring at her cold cup of tea. Her hands trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it. David was pacing near the back door, his eyes fixed on the basement key that lay on the counter. Neither of them spoke for several minutes, as if words might break the fragile silence that held them together. The children were upstairs, unusually quiet. Even the dog refused to come near the basement door now. David finally stopped pacing and said, "We can't ignore this anymore." His voice was low, almost shaking. Lisa nodded. They both knew it was time to go down there and find out what their children were hiding. The plumber's frightened face from the day before still haunted them both. He had seen something that made him pale and speechless, and he had left without finishing his work. That wasn't normal. Something about that basement was wrong. As David reached for the key, Lisa whispered, "Maybe we should wait until the kids come home." David shook his head. "No. Whatever's down there, it's already too late to pretend we don't know." He unlocked the door. The rusty hinges cried out as he opened it. A musty smell of earth and damp would fill the air. Lisa held her breath. The narrow staircase led down into darkness, only half lit by the dim bulb that flickered like a dying candle. Every step creaked under David's weight. Lisa followed, clutching the railing so tightly her knuckles turned white. When they reached the bottom, they stood in the middle of the basement, surrounded by old boxes, broken furniture, and tools covered in dust. Everything looked normal at first, until David noticed something strange near the far wall. The cement floor there looked newer than the rest. It was smoother, cleaner. Almost like someone had recently worked there. Lisa's heartbeat quickened. "That wasn't like that before," she said quietly. David nodded. He walked closer and crouched down, touching the floor. The concrete was cold, but he could feel faint scratches on its surface, like marks made by dragging something heavy. Suddenly, he spotted a small, loose tile near the wall. He pulled it out carefully, and beneath it, he saw a tiny gap. His breath stopped. There was something hidden underneath. Lisa stepped closer. "What is that?" she asked. David didn't answer. He reached for a hammer from a nearby toolbox and began breaking the tiles around the spot. The sound of cracking stone echoed through the basement, each strike louder than the last. Lisa covered her mouth, her body trembling with fear. After a few minutes, David uncovered a small wooden hatch. It was old but not part of the original floor. Someone had built it recently. He hesitated for a moment, then lifted the handle and slowly opened it. A strong smell hit them both, something between metal and mold. Inside the hidden space, they saw a small wooden box. David carefully lifted it out and placed it on the ground. It was locked. The lock looked new, not like something from years ago. Lisa stared at it, her chest tightening. "Do we open it?" she whispered. David didn't reply. He grabbed a screwdriver and broke the lock open. The lid creaked as he lifted it. Inside, they found old photographs, dozens of them. Some were faded, others new. But all of them showed their children, with strangers. Adults they didn't recognize. In some photos, their kids looked scared. In others, they looked like they were meeting someone secretly, somewhere in the dark, maybe this very basement. Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "What is this? Why would they hide these?" David picked up one of the newer photos. It was of their eldest son, Daniel, standing in the basement, holding something small in his hands, something wrapped in cloth. In the background, there was a shadowy figure, half visible, almost like someone watching him. Lisa's voice cracked. David, who is that behind him? Before David could answer, they heard a sudden noise from upstairs, footsteps, fast and heavy. Someone had entered the house. Lisa gasped and clutched David's arm. He quickly put the box aside and turned off the basement light. They both listened. The footsteps stopped right above them. Then, slowly, they began descending the stairs. David picked up the hammer again, ready to defend them if needed. The creaking steps got closer. A familiar voice called out softly, "Mom? Dad? What are you doing down there?" It was Daniel. David turned the light back on. His son stood halfway down the stairs, his expression calm but strange. Lisa felt a chill. There was no surprise in Daniel's face, only quiet understanding, as if he already knew what they had found. "Daniel," Lisa said shakily, "what is this box? Why are there photos of you with strangers?" Daniel looked at the box, then at his parents. His lips parted slightly, but for a few seconds, he didn't speak. Finally, he said, "You shouldn't have opened that." His voice was soft but cold. David frowned. "Tell me what's going on." Daniel stepped down the last few stairs and walked toward them slowly. His eyes were distant, his tone almost whispering. "I tried to stop it, Dad. But I couldn't. They wouldn't let me." Lisa's heart pounded. "Who wouldn't let you?" "Daniel, please, you're scaring me." Daniel's gaze shifted to the hidden hole in the floor. "They made me hide it there. They said if I told anyone, they would hurt all of us." David's grip on the hammer tightened. "Who are they, Daniel? Who are you talking about?" Before Daniel could answer, another sound echoed from upstairs, the front door slammed shut. Then came faint voices, whispering. David froze. Lisa's eyes widened in terror. Daniel turned toward the stairs and whispered, "They're here." The basement lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely, leaving them in total darkness. Lisa screamed softly, reaching out for David's hand. He held her tightly. They could hear Daniel's voice in the dark, trembling now. "I told you, you shouldn't have come down here." Something moved above them, slow footsteps circling the basement door. The whispers grew louder, almost like chanting. The air turned cold, and the smell of damp earth thickened. Then, a loud bang echoed from the top of the stairs, shaking the walls. The old bulb flashed on for a second, revealing Daniel's face, pale, frightened, but determined. "Get out!" he shouted. "Now!" The light went out again, followed by silence. And that was the moment Lisa realized they were no longer alone in the basement. The silence that followed was deafening. The single bulb above them flickered weakly before dying completely, leaving the basement swallowed in complete darkness. Lisa could barely breathe. Her hand tightened around David's arm as her pulse raced wildly. She could still hear faint sounds, soft, slow footsteps above them, like someone was walking in circles just beyond the basement door. "David," she whispered shakily, "what's happening? Who's up there?" David didn't reply. He was straining his ears, trying to make sense of the whispers that floated down the staircase. They were low, broken, and filled with strange pauses. It didn't sound like just one person, there were several voices, maybe 3 or 4, murmuring in tones that made Lisa's skin crawl. Then Daniel spoke again. His voice came from somewhere near the stairs, trembling, yet calm in a strange way. "Mom, Dad, please listen. Whatever happens, don't go upstairs. Promise me." Lisa's throat felt tight. "Daniel, what do you mean? Who are those people?" Daniel didn't answer right away. Instead, a sound of metal scraping against the concrete floor made both his parents flinch. He was moving something heavy. David could hear him pulling one of the old shelves toward the corner of the room. "Daniel!" David shouted. "Tell me what's going on." Finally, Daniel stopped. His voice came back, low and filled with fear. They know you found the box. They've been watching us for weeks. They wanted me to keep quiet, but I couldn't anymore. Lisa's voice cracked. Who are they, Daniel? You're scaring us. There was a short pause. Then Daniel whispered, the people from the photos. They're not strangers. They're the ones who used to live here before us. David froze. He turned to Lisa, who looked equally confused. What do you mean used to live here? This house was empty when we bought it. The agent said no one had lived here for years. Daniel shook his head in the dark. That's not true. They never left, Dad. They live down here. Lisa's knees nearly gave out. What are you talking about? She gasped. Before anyone could say more, something thudded hard against the basement door. The sound echoed like thunder, shaking dust from the ceiling. Lisa screamed. David rushed forward, gripping the hammer tighter. Who's there? He shouted. No reply came, only slow knocking, 3 times. Then silence again. Daniel ran forward and grabbed his father's arm. Please, don't open it. That's what they want. Lisa was crying now, barely holding herself up. Daniel, please, tell us everything. Tell us what's happening. Daniel's breathing was shaky. I didn't mean for this to happen. It started months ago. I heard noises down here, whispers late at night. I thought it was just the pipes. But then I found old things hidden in the walls, clothes, letters, and a small notebook. It had names of people who used to live here. They all disappeared. No one ever found them. Lisa stared in horror. Oh my God. Daniel continued, his voice quivering. One night, I followed the voices. I came down here and saw them, shadows at first, moving between the walls. Then they spoke to me. They said they needed my help. They told me to keep something safe for them. David's heart pounded in his chest. The box, he said slowly. Daniel nodded. Yes. They said if I didn't protect it, they'd take you both. I didn't know what to do. I was scared, Dad. I hid it under the floor just like they told me. Lisa could hardly breathe. And the photos? Who took them? Daniel hesitated. They did. They made me pose with them. Said it would keep the memory alive. I didn't understand. Sometimes they looked real, like normal people. Other times, they looked wrong. Before David could respond, the basement door suddenly rattled violently. The knob twisted back and forth. Then a whisper came through the cracks in the wood, cold, breathy, and sharp. You shouldn't have opened it. Lisa screamed again. David rushed to the bottom of the stairs, shouting, Who are you? What do you want from my family? There was no clear answer, only a faint laugh that faded into silence. Then, as if nothing had happened, the door creaked open by itself. Light from the hallway spilled down the stairs, cutting through the darkness. But it wasn't warm light, it was pale, almost gray, like the light before a storm. David's instinct screamed to run, but something in that light made him freeze. Shadows danced across the walls, forming shapes that looked almost human. Lisa clung to his arm, whispering, David, don't go up there. Daniel stood behind them, his eyes wide. They're showing themselves now, he said softly. They're angry. David turned to his son. Why? What do they want? Daniel's voice cracked. They want to be remembered. They want to finish what they started. Before anyone could move, one of the shadows slid down the stairs, stretching across the floor like black smoke. Lisa gasped as the temperature dropped suddenly. Her breath came out as white mist. The shadow stopped near the open hatch where the box had been. Then, slowly, it began to rise, forming a tall, faint figure. Its shape was blurry, but Lisa could see its face, hollow eyes and a thin mouth that didn't move when it spoke. "You took what was ours," it whispered. Lisa stumbled back, screaming. David swung the hammer wildly through the air, but it passed through the figure like fog. Daniel shouted, "Stop! Please, they don't want to hurt us, they just want the box." Lisa cried out, "We already opened it. There's nothing left." The figure turned its empty gaze toward her. "Then you will give us something else," it hissed. Suddenly, the door above slammed shut again, trapping them inside. The sound echoed like thunder, and the light went out completely once more. Lisa screamed as she felt something cold brush against her shoulder. David grabbed her and pulled her close, shouting, "Daniel! What do we do?" Daniel's voice came faintly from the darkness. "We have to give them what they lost." "What did they lose?" David shouted. But Daniel didn't answer. His footsteps moved toward the far corner, where the hole in the floor still gaped open. Then came a sound, the soft scrape of something being dragged. Lisa could barely see him, but she heard him say quietly, "It's the only way to end this." David reached for his son, shouting, "Daniel, stop." But before he could reach him, Daniel dropped something heavy into the hole. A deep, echoing thud followed, like something hitting the ground far below. Then silence. The shadowy figure faded slowly, disappearing into the darkness. The basement lights flickered back on. Everything was still again. Lisa collapsed against the wall, sobbing. David looked around, the box was gone. The floor was covered in dust, but the hatch was now shut tight as if it had never been opened. He turned to his son. "Daniel, what did you do?" Daniel looked pale and exhausted. "I gave them back what they wanted," he said softly. Lisa whispered, "What was it?" Daniel met her eyes, his face unreadable. "The thing they made me hide wasn't just photos or objects, Mom. It was a piece of their memory. I had to return it, before they took ours." Lisa didn't understand, but her heart ached. David looked at the now quiet basement, feeling the air slowly warm again. It felt over, but deep inside, he knew it wasn't. Because even though the lights were back on and the house was silent, something about the basement still felt alive. And as they turned to go upstairs, a faint whisper echoed behind them, soft and cold. "Thank you for remembering us." Lisa froze mid-step. Her blood ran cold. She turned slowly, but there was nothing there. Just the empty basement, still and quiet. The next morning felt strangely quiet. The sunlight streaming through the windows couldn't chase away the heaviness in the house. Lisa and David sat at the kitchen table, still shaken from the previous night. Daniel, unusually silent, sat across from them, staring at the floor. The events in the basement haunted them all. Even though the shadows had vanished, the tension lingered like a thick fog. Lisa finally broke the silence. "Daniel, what do you mean when you say you returned their memory? What exactly did you do?" Daniel looked up, his eyes dark and tired. I don't really know how to explain it. It wasn't a thing you can see. It was more like a part of them that they lost a long time ago. They made me hide it, and if I didn't give it back, they said they would take everything from us, our memories, our family, maybe even us. David leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. "Wait, so these people, the ones in the basement, they're gone now? They won't come back?" Daniel shook his head slowly. "I think they're gone. But I can still feel them sometimes. Especially at night, or when the basement door creaks." Lisa shivered. "David, maybe we should leave this house. I can't stay here. I feel like they're still watching." David understood. He had the same feeling. But he also knew something: if they left now, it might not end. They had been involved, and whatever secrets the house held, it was a part of them now. The day passed slowly. The house seemed empty, yet the memory of last night's terror lingered. Daniel remained quiet most of the time, only speaking when necessary. Lisa tried to keep herself busy, cleaning and organizing, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something invisible was observing them. Late that afternoon, David decided to investigate the basement again. He had to make sure everything was truly safe. Lisa watched nervously as he descended the stairs. The basement smelled the same, damp and cold. The hatch that had hidden the box was shut, perfectly flush with the floor. The walls were empty. For a moment, it looked normal, like an ordinary basement. But David's gut told him otherwise. He knelt down and touched the floor where the box had been. Nothing happened. He listened carefully, not a sound. Finally, he straightened and called Lisa down. "Come see," he said. Lisa stepped carefully down the stairs, glancing around. "It's just the basement," she said. "I don't understand." "Nothing's here." David shook his head. "I know. But I feel like we're missing something. Something important." Then Daniel spoke from behind them. "It's the memory," he said softly. "It's not something we can see, but it's still here. They left it behind, and now it belongs to the house, and to us." Lisa frowned. "Belongs to us? What does that mean?" Daniel looked up at her, his eyes serious. "It means that whatever they lost, whatever they wanted me to protect, I did. And now it's part of this house. Part of us. I can't explain it fully, Mom. But it's over. I think." David ran a hand over his face. "Over? I'm not sure if I believe that. There's still something in here. I can feel it." Daniel nodded. "I feel it too. But it's not angry anymore. Not like before. It's quiet." Lisa tried to smile, but it was weak. "Quiet isn't the same as gone," she said. "And I don't know if I'll ever feel safe here again." That evening, the family sat together in the living room, exhausted but relieved that the immediate danger seemed to have passed. They didn't talk much. The memories of the basement, the shadows, and the strange voices weighed heavily on them. Even dinner was quiet, no laughter, no small talk, just the clinking of forks against plates. After dinner, Daniel asked if he could go to his room. He seemed tired and distant. Lisa followed him to his door. "Daniel, I know this was hard," she said softly. "But you were brave. You did the right thing." Daniel nodded, but didn't speak. His face was pale, and his eyes were heavy with fatigue. "I just hope it's really over," he whispered. Lisa hugged him tightly. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." That night, David and Lisa lay awake in bed. The house was quiet. The shadows had vanished, the whispers had stopped, and the basement seemed normal. But still, David couldn't shake the feeling that something lingered. Something unseen. The memory the shadows had left behind wasn't dangerous, he thought. But it was powerful. A reminder that the past, even when hidden, could shape the present. Hours passed. Sleep came slowly. And as they drifted, David's mind wandered to the box, the photos, and Daniel's words. The shadows were gone, but the memory remained. In the basement, where the hatch hid the box, a faint chill lingered in the air. A whisper brushed against the walls, soft and distant. "Thank you for remembering us." David sat up, gasping. Lisa stirred beside him, sensing his fear. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Lisa nodded slowly, hugging the blanket close. "Yes. I did. But it doesn't sound angry anymore. Just sad." David exhaled slowly, trying to calm himself. Maybe it was over. Maybe the shadows would never return. But deep down, he knew the basement had changed them all. Their children, their family, even the house itself, would never be the same. And somewhere deep in the floorboards, hidden in the walls, the memory remained, a piece of the past that had been lost and finally returned. The night passed. Morning came, and the sun's warmth finally reached into the house. Life slowly returned to a normal rhythm. The children spoke quietly at breakfast. Daniel still seemed distant, but calmer. And Lisa and David tried to focus on daily life, even as the weight of the previous events lingered silently in their minds. But even in the bright daylight, the house felt alive with its secret. And the basement, well, the basement would always hold the shadows of what had come before. Weeks passed since the terrifying events in the basement. Life slowly began to return to a semblance of normality for David, Lisa, and their children. The shadows no longer appeared, the whispers had ceased, and the mysterious box that had once held so much fear had vanished. Yet, despite the calm, a quiet tension lingered in the house. Every creak of the floor, every flicker of a light, reminded them of what had happened, and of what they might never fully understand. David tried to go about his daily routine. He worked from home, fixed small things around the house, and tried to be present for his family. Lisa busied herself with household chores, grocery shopping, and caring for the children. Daniel and Emily slowly returned to their normal routines, though a certain wariness remained in their eyes. Occasionally, Daniel would glance toward the basement door, his expression unreadable. It was clear the events had left a deep mark on them all. One afternoon, as David was sorting through old boxes in the attic, he came across a small, dust-covered envelope that he had never seen before. Curious, he picked it up and noticed his name written on it in an unfamiliar hand. There was no return address. Heart-pounding, he opened the envelope and carefully pulled out a folded piece of paper. On it was a short message written in shaky handwriting. "You returned what we lost. But one memory remains hidden. Only you can choose to see it." David's hands trembled. He showed the note to Lisa. Her face paled as she read it. "David, this isn't over, is it?" "I don't think so," David replied quietly. "It's something we haven't found yet, something important that they wanted us to discover." That evening, the family gathered in the living room. David explained the note to Daniel and Emily. Both children exchanged uneasy glances, and Emily spoke first. "I think I know where it is," she said softly. "It's in the basement. There's another hidden space behind the wall where the box was. I didn't want to tell you before because it felt dangerous." David nodded slowly. "Then we have to go. Together. We need to see this through. We need to know what the final memory is." Lisa hesitated. "Are you sure? After everything that's happened?" Daniel spoke firmly. "We need to do it, Mom. We can't let this stay a secret anymore." That night, armed with flashlights, gloves, and a sense of dread, the family went down to the basement together. The air was colder than before, thick with the memory of past events. The hatch that had once hidden the box was still sealed, but Emily moved forward. She knelt and pressed against the wall, listening carefully. Then she whispered, "Here. There's a small panel behind the old shelf. I can feel it." David moved the shelf aside, revealing a narrow wooden door, smaller than the first hatch. The wood was old and splintered, but a faint outline of a handle could be seen. David took a deep breath and opened it. Inside was a narrow space, just large enough for one person to crawl in. At the center lay a small, rectangular object covered in black cloth. David gently lifted it out. It was surprisingly heavy. Emily and Daniel both looked anxious, their eyes wide. David carefully removed the cloth. Inside was a small, intricately carved wooden box. Unlike the first, this box had no lock, but strange symbols were etched into the surface. The air around it felt thick, almost alive, as if it pulsed with energy. Daniel stepped forward and touched the box. I can feel it, it's like it's waiting. Lisa reached for David's hand. Be careful. Whatever it is, it's connected to all of this. David opened the box slowly. Inside, there was a collection of objects, small trinkets, photographs, letters, and tiny toys. But among them was something unexpected, a small, folded piece of paper. David unfolded it and gasped. The paper contained a message from the previous occupants of the house. We trusted you to remember us. You returned the box, but one final piece remains, the memory of our family. We were torn apart by loss and tragedy, and we hid this to protect it. Now you must keep it safe, not for us, but for your own children. Never let it be forgotten. David looked at Lisa, and she understood immediately. This was more than just a memory, it was a warning, a lesson, and a responsibility. Daniel spoke quietly. It's why we were chosen. Why they made me hide the first box. We were meant to protect it, to understand it, and to learn from it. Lisa nodded slowly, tears in her eyes. So all of this, the shadows, the whispers, the fear, it was to teach us something? Daniel smiled faintly. Yes. And now it's over. We know the truth, and we can move forward. For the first time in weeks, a sense of peace filled the basement. The air felt warmer, lighter, as if the house itself was finally releasing its hold on them. David carefully returned the objects to the box and placed it on a high shelf in the basement, out of reach, yet accessible if needed. That night, the family gathered in the living room, exhausted but relieved. The house was finally quiet. The shadows and whispers were gone. The memory they had returned, and the final secret they had discovered, allowed them to feel safe again, but also reminded them of the fragility of life and the unseen forces that sometimes shape it. As they went to bed, David whispered to Lisa, "We've done what we needed to do. We protected the children, and we protected the past. But the memory will always be here, reminding us of what we've learned." Lisa held his hand tightly. Yes. And we'll never forget it. Upstairs, Daniel and Emily finally slept soundly, their faces calm. The house, though old and full of history, felt like home once again. But somewhere in the walls, deep within the basement, the faint memory of the past lingered, quiet, safe, and finally at peace. And as the family closed their eyes, a faint whisper seemed to echo through the house, soft and almost gentle. Thank you for remembering us. The morning after discovering the final memory, the house felt different. It wasn't just quiet, it was lighter, warmer, as if the very walls had exhaled a sigh of relief. David, Lisa, Daniel, and Emily moved through the rooms slowly, almost cautiously, aware that the past weeks had changed them forever. Even though the shadows and whispers were gone, the memory they had returned lingered subtly in the air, like a gentle presence watching over them. Breakfast was a quiet affair. The children ate slowly, their eyes bright but thoughtful. Lisa poured herself a cup of tea, feeling the calm settle in her chest. David sat across from her, staring at the table as if trying to make sense of everything. Do you think it's really over? Lisa asked softly. David nodded slowly. I think so. We returned what needed to be returned. We faced what was hidden and protected our children. That house, it's not dangerous anymore. But the memory of what happened will stay with us. Daniel spoke quietly from his chair. I feel lighter now. It's strange, but like a weight has been lifted. I think they were trapped in the past, and we helped them move on. Emily smiled faintly, the first real smile in weeks. And now we can live without fear. At least, I hope so. After breakfast, the family decided to spend the day outside. The sun was shining, and the air smelled of early spring. For the first time in weeks, they walked together without hesitation, laughing quietly as they passed the familiar streets near their home. It was a normal day, a simple one, but it felt extraordinary after all that had happened. When they returned home, they went down to the basement once more. The hatch where the first box had been hidden was now sealed and covered. The final box, containing the last memory, was safely on the high shelf. David, Lisa, and the children looked at it together. "This will stay here," David said softly. "A reminder of the past, but also a lesson. Some things are hidden for a reason, and sometimes we have to face fear to protect what we love." Lisa nodded. "And we've done that. We've protected each other, and now we can move forward." The children helped clean up the basement, moving boxes, sweeping the floor, and arranging furniture. It felt good to do something ordinary, to restore the space to normalcy. Every sound, the brush on the floor, the boxes being shifted, the laughter of children, seemed to erase the tension that had held the house for so long. As evening approached, the family gathered in the living room once more. The sun had set, leaving the room warm with the golden glow of the lamps. David looked around at his family, his heart full. "We've learned something important," he said. "The past may leave shadows, memories, or secrets, but facing them together makes us stronger. Fear doesn't disappear completely, but courage, love, and understanding can guide us through it." Lisa reached for his hand. "And the memory we returned, it's not just theirs anymore. It's ours too. A part of us, a reminder to cherish what we have every single day." Daniel and Emily smiled, their eyes reflecting the soft light. Daniel said softly, "I'll never forget what happened. And I'll never forget what we did. We protected something important, and we stayed together." David and Lisa hugged their children tightly. For the first time in weeks, there were no shadows, no whispers, and no fear, only love, understanding, and a quiet sense of peace. As the night settled over the house, the basement remained still. The boxes, the hidden memories, and the lessons they carried were now safe. The family went to bed together, hearts lighter, minds calmer, and spirits stronger. They had faced the unknown, uncovered the secrets, and emerged on the other side, united, safe, and forever changed. Somewhere deep in the walls, the faint memory of the past lingered quietly. But now, it was not menacing. It was a gentle reminder of what had been lost and what had been returned. A presence of gratitude, watching over the family it had once frightened, now at peace. And in the calm silence, a soft whisper echoed one last time. "Thank you for remembering us." If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever discovered a secret that changed everything you knew? I'd love to hear your stories. Remember, sometimes the past hides things for a reason, and facing it together is the only way to find peace.